Welcome to episode 339 of the DFO Rundown presented by Bet365. Download the app today and use the promo code NATION to get in on a huge range of markets. Whatever the moment, it's never ordinary at Bet365. And man, if you would have bet Saquon Barkley to have some other big runs, man, that guy is killing it. Talk about excitement in football. And at Bet365, you do that in hockey. You've got guys like Faceoff, McKinnon, McDavid's got 8 goals, 18 points in his last 8 games. But Frank, if we would have put odds on how many days Jim Montgomery would be a free agent, if you'd have picked the under 7, you would have won as the St. Louis Blues. We talked about this last pod. We didn't think he'd be a free agent very long. And he's back in St. Louis where he used to be an associate coach.
Yeah, in some ways, not surprising. In other ways, just the fact that someone did it. Like we talked about it on the pod. We even mentioned St. Louis last week as one of the possibilities. There's familiarity there. He was really well liked in his time in St. Louis as an associate coach. And I think more so than anything, I'm struck by a few things. One, that Doug Armstrong did not pull any punches in his press conference over the weekend saying, look, we felt there was a better option available. Like just be honest and transparent, which we know that was the case. I mean, not to say Drew Bannister lit the world on fire with the Blues, but the idea being, hey, we have a Jack Adams winner right at our disposal here, someone that we've already worked with, we know and trust. We're going to just pull the trigger. So yeah. I thought that was the honesty and transparency was, I think, needed. And I don't know if that's a slight on Drew Bannister on the way out, but whatever it is, it is. And the other part is just Doug Armstrong doesn't care. Then I say that in the best way possible. You know, if you want loyalty, get a dog. That's really the thought process, because whether it's offer sheets over the summer, whether it's firing your coach to hire another one, whatever the case may be, I think the NHL in general needs less play nice in the sandbox, needs more, I'm going to do whatever I can, all is fair to improve my team and my franchise.
Well, I think it comes down to a few things. Obviously, ownership is like, you know what? We're willing to take on the extra cost. We're paying 2 head coaches now for a few seasons, and that's fine. So you always have to have ownership who's willing to spend, and they haven't been scared. I think after winning the Cup in 2019, I think it changed the mindset a little bit of the Blues organization, because for the longest time, right, they never won, and they really hadn't come close. And now there's, I think, a different expectation. They obviously trust their GM. And you know what? We talked about it, Frank, specifically that, and this is not the first time we've seen a coach, get fired and get hired within 8 days. It's happened 3-4 times before.
In fact, by the way, the last 3 Boston Bruins coaches have all been hired within 7 days.
Yeah.
It's Jim Montgomery, it's Bruce Cassidy, and it's Claude Julien.
Yeah. Yeah, it's nuts.
Crazy.
And so, you know what? If you feel when a guy comes available and your guy, it doesn't mean that Drew Bannister can't be a good head coach. They just feel that this guy's a little bit better. Now, I know it's unorthodox, and, you talked about loyalty. It's, you know what? Drew Bannister's still getting paid. And so that's different than in a lot of other jobs. If you get let go, you don't get the full term. You might get a buyout or something for a few years service, but the NHL is different. And so Drew Bannister, yeah, it sucks because, you kind of get fired in a public realm. Everybody knows about it, and you go home, but at least he's getting paid. And you know what? There'll be other teams when their coaching becomes available. He's likely a guy who's going to apply, and I don't think he'll be out very long. Not necessarily as a head coach. He might have to go back to being an assistant because he just doesn't have a great track record because it wasn't given the opportunity, unfortunately. So we'll see. But I look at St. Louis, Frank, and we talked about teams who maybe weren't at the top to win, but needed to kind of climb the mountain. And I think that's where the Blues are. And so a teaching coach is probably the best fit for them.
So I had this debate with someone over the weekend, and they said, look, if in any other business, if you attempted to do what Doug Armstrong just did, you'd be fired. Meaning he just gave Drew Bannister a 2-year contract this summer and kept him as head coach after a somewhat lengthy and undistinguished run as interim coach. It was almost like he couldn't find better. I don't know if that makes any sense when I say it, but like it wasn't, I don't know that anything was necessarily clicking last year under Drew Bannister. So you make the decision to bring in a new guy after 22 games after you just gave a 2-year contract to the old guy. Some of that would put you on the firing line. Like, hey, when does the attention turn to general manager? And I took the completely different approach, which was, I think the St. Louis Blues have been one of the best run teams in the NHL since Doug Armstrong took over. Would you buy or sell on that? Not to steal Tyler's thunder.
Yeah, I think that's probably fair.
Okay, so if that is the case, let me just read you some of the stats since Doug Armstrong took over in 2010. So it's 14 seasons, not including this year. Wins 5th, points 5th, 10 playoff appearances in 14 seasons, 9 playoff rounds won, 6th in playoff games played, and 12th in playoff wins with 1 Stanley Cup.
Yeah, it's hard to argue that.
When you are in a small market where if we're all being honest here, and it's not to shit on any one city, but does anyone actually get up and they're like, oh my God, I really want to play in St. Louis? It's definitely not a destination. If we're talking places for people to go, it's in the bottom quartile of the league. Is it not?
Yeah, probably. Although I guess it depends what players look at. If players want stability in an organization, then it should probably be top 10. But if you want lifestyle, you're right. It might be lower.
So that's my only point. And not only that, over 14 seasons, what do you think the St. Louis Blues average draft position is for their first pick?
Oh, I'm going to say 16th, 18th,
30th. Because they've traded a ton of picks.
Okay.
30th is their average draft position over 14 years. And the fact that through all of that, they are 5th in wins, 6th in playoff games played, I think pretty impressive. So just to take a devil's advocate, he's done it at times in a small market with a place that's not a destination, with multiple iterations of a roster. And yet this team has been ultra competitive for a long period of time.
Yeah, I don't mind the Blues. And, here's the other thing. When the people say, well, you'd be fired everywhere else. Now, in some places, Frank, when you hire someone new, now, I don't know what the probation period is in the U.S., but guys can be on probation. And if you don't feel like they're doing their job, even if they're the CEO or they're the president or you're your head manager, well, you could let them go and you don't even have to pay them out. So Bannister was kind of on probation for the real world, was he not?
Yeah. Not really. That's bullshit. He was an interim coach for a while.
Yeah, I know, but when he was the interim coach, he didn't have the new contract, right? So that would have been an existing one.
Yeah. But
right.
Either way.
Yeah. But either way, I don't know if you'd get fired. To me, you have to go to the owner and your owner says, okay, man, so here's the thing. We can hire Jim, but we're going to have to pay Jim and Drew. Are you comfortable with that? All right. And it's kind of there. So it's not just the GM. I think you have to have buy-in from your ownership group, right? And Stillman, and obviously they do. And away we go. Now the thing is, how good are the Blues? I look at their division. I don't see them as a playoff
That's the
team.
thing I'm not really seeing is I don't know. The head coach is a great addition and I think should improve things, but I don't look at that roster and say that's a competitive playoff roster. Which kind of brings us back to the conversation about Doug Armstrong.
Yeah. So, well, when you outline that the 30th overall pick, eventually you're going to have to retool. I'll say this about the Blues. Well, they might not have high picks. They've hit on some pretty good picks, right?
Their draft record is fantastic, especially given where
Neighbors at 26 is a hell of a pick, right?
Yeah.
So, Robert Thomas, 20th overall. That's a pretty solid pick. Tage Thompson, remember now they traded for him, but that won them a cup, O'Reilly, like that. So they're drafting considering now the last 4 years yet. Like we'll see Jimmy Snuggerud. There's lots of people that are hiring him. He's kind of right in that mid-20 range. So we'll see. But the Blues, they could probably benefit themselves, honestly, Frank. I know that this is counterproductive, but just try to be like the 7 Flyers or 6 Flyers when they tank, and then they went out, they got Timon and Hartnell, and boom, they came right back, right? Like they didn't have an extended stay at the bottom, and they had some injuries that year. Like St. Louis might be better off to get one good pick and then come back fighting rather than, because I think it is harder, although not impossible, St. Louis showing it, that it is harder to find really good players when you're constantly drafting in the 20s and 30s.
They've hit on some late-ish round picks since Doug Armstrong took over. Jordan Binnington, 3rd round. Joel Edmondson, 2nd. Colton Parayko, 3rd. I mean, look at their draft in 2014. Sammy Blais, 6th round. Ville Husso, 4th. Jake Wallman, 3rd. Ivan Barbashev, 2nd. And their 1st round pick was Robbie Fabry at 21, who probably would have been a lot better if he didn't have like 3 knee surgeries.
Yeah.
Vince Dunn, 2nd round. You mentioned Jordan Kyrou, 2nd round. Klim Kostin was the last pick in 2017. I mean, in the 1st round.
But Nico Mikkel is a sound 5th round pick.
Pretty good. I don't know. Just an interesting debate. Does anyone take any issue with Doug Armstrong here? And did you see the quote this morning from Jim Montgomery?
I did not.
Jim Montgomery said how persuasive Doug Armstrong is. And he said, the best line that put his hooks into me was, when something delicious falls on my plate, I eat. He said, I guess I was a T-bone that day.
Yeah. Well, there you go. It is there. Continuity and knowing someone does matter, I think, in this business, right? Jim Montgomery feels comfortable. He probably trusts Doug Armstrong. They've worked before and vice versa. So, he's
not guessing.
Yeah, exactly. You know where you're going. You kind of know what the vision is of the organization. I'd love to know if they had the conversation. Okay, Doug, like, how good do you think this roster is? That's the question. At the end of the day, how good is the Blues roster?
Yeah, but he got a 5-year deal, which is somewhat unprecedented for coaches.
Well, they're going to need look at their goaltending. Like Binnington's been really good for the last 4 years, actually. His underlying numbers are great. This year, they're not very good. So can this team suddenly win way more if they get better goaltending and better team defense?
Maybe.
Yeah. So
what does that say of the Bruins of anything, if anything? Like Bruce Cassidy leaves after 6 days, goes to Vegas and wins a cup. Jim Montgomery lasts on the market 5 days. Do you take anything from that?
We'll see, right? Like Cassidy worked out, but he also went to a pretty good organization. Claude Julien, when he left, went to Montreal. They didn't do anything. So, they had the one Cinderella run, but really, Montreal is my favorite stat about the Habs this year, Frank. This will be the first time ever. They're the longest running franchise in NHL history to miss the playoffs 4 years in a row. First time ever. Stunning to me. But anyway, I don't know.
By the way, Claude Julien is an assistant in St. Louis, if you didn't remember. So oddly enough, Montgomery, 2 of the last 3 Bruins coaches are on the same bench now.
Yeah. So we'll see how this goes for them. But I think it is surprising in Boston how quickly they want to just say, well, it's got to be the coach. We'll find out if this time, like last time it worked, right? They brought in Montgomery. They had great success, greatest regular season ever. Now they didn't get it done in the playoffs. And, the one thing on Montgomery, I think, will always be the decision to go against what they did all year to have the greatest record of all time. And then he suddenly tried to run one goalie, which they hadn't done all year long, right? That decision will always kind of be one that's second guessed.
So my big question is, how many other teams talked about this and thought about it?
Be a good question. The Ducks,
I think if the Anaheim Ducks didn't have that conversation, they're out to lunch.
The Red Wings?
Same thing. I don't know why you wouldn't be talking about it.
So those would be the 2 that come to my mind. I'd have to look at. There's been so many coaching changes. Now Bannister's not that long tenured, so I guess you could argue almost any team.
22 games he got. It's one of the shortest runs ever by any coach that's a full-time non-interim coach.
Yeah.
I tweeted the list the other day. Mike Babcock, 0 games. Barry Melrose, 16 in 2008 with the Lightning. Ron Ralston got 20 games in 2013. That's kind of it. And sometimes when you know, I guess. But still, the Blues don't sit back. They make stuff happen. Why wait? Because someone else is going to come grab the guy that you want. Should the Pittsburgh Penguins have been having that conversation? I mean, we probably should talk at some point today about just how bad this is for the Penguins.
Hey, Frankie, everybody's slowly coming around to what's the best move for that organization. I'm not saying it'll happen, but I've been saying it should have happened a long time ago. They're bad. Like, honestly, they're worse now than when Dubas took over.
I watched the game on Friday night, Jets Penguins, and look, when I look at that team and where they are, you ever feel something about body language, like in terms of just an overall team? Like, hey, you look at them and you think something is off. Kevin Sawyer was saying he was between the benches for the Jets broadcast, and he said on the air that it was actually uncomfortable how little, like he said, Mike Sullivan wasn't even speaking on the bench. Does that tell you anything?
Well, I wonder if, I think frustration is at an all-time high in Pittsburgh, Frank. And I also think that there's maybe that sometimes you need to be almost smacked in the face hard to get a realization like this isn't, wow, we thought we could come out of it. And I truly believe the Penguins did. I firmly believe they felt, okay, you know what? Crosby signs his 2 years. You know what? We're going to be better this year. We're going to come back, or we're going to have better team. We brought in some other guys and it's going to work. And it's actually gotten worse.
They're delusional.
Yeah.
They were absolutely delusional from the start.
Yeah.
So my question is, we now know that these players are not the group that's going to be able to get it done collectively. How much of that do you put on the coach? And at some point, is it just time?
Yeah. It's easy to always blame the coach because it's one person. It's like when your team isn't going well and your goalie lets in a bad goal or two, it's everybody points to the goalie. Meanwhile, the team defense could be terrible and your forwards, or don't have a clue and need a map in their own zone, but the goalie's the one who gets the blame. And I think at times the coach gets the blame because, well, it's the old adage, can't fire the whole team. And the GM, well, he's got a little bit more job security. He's higher up on the pole. And so, and I wonder sometimes, Frank, when you're used to being competitive, and you've won Stanley Cups and you've been in conference finals and you're in the playoffs, when all of a sudden you're not, it can be hard. And I'm not saying anybody's quitting in Pittsburgh. I just think it becomes harder. Life is harder some days, right? If you have more money in the bank, you're not stressed. The person, the families out there living paycheck to paycheck, it's more stressful. It's just how it is. And I think when you're losing in the NHL and the realization is we're not very good, and there's no magic tonic here. It's not like the Penguins have 3 guys that are hurt and they're coming back next week and, okay, we're going to be good. Or, man, we've got 3 or 4 young guys in the minors.
That's what I was just going to say. There's no prospects on the way.
No.
I mean, you're already seeing a couple of these guys that kind of came in already. Rutger McGroarty was there. Owen Pickering is playing. Like, there is no one else. That's it.
It's a long rebuild that's coming in Pittsburgh. And that's why I've said it many times. I know it's hard, but what did you just talk about? Sometimes you got to make the hard decision. And I don't know how the conversation would go, but the best thing for all parties, because the guy would command you a huge return, is to start the rebuild. Because you can keep Sidney Crosby for the rest of this year and 2 more years. And Sid's unreal. But he had his 3rd best goal scoring season last year. He had 94 points. Was he 12th in the NHL in scoring? They didn't make the playoffs. They're not getting better. They didn't add new players to support the other 40 minutes when Sid's off the ice. And that's the problem.
But then you watch and you go, oh, there's Sam Dickinson, almost 2 points per game as a defenseman for the London Knights in the OHL this year. Oh, yeah, that's the pick that we traded to San Jose for Erik Karlsson. It just gets worse and worse and worse.
Yeah, that Carlson trade, man. Whew.
Sam Dickinson, a defenseman, has 13 goals in 21 games in the OHL. 13 goals in 21 games. 38 points in 21 games.
Yeah, he's pretty good.
So now what? I don't, something has to happen. And by the way, I think the Pittsburgh Penguins are one of the teams that have been closely monitoring the David Jiricek situation in Columbus, which seems to be coming to a head. And I wouldn't be shocked to see it happen in relatively short order. But
this should be
what
do you think the return is for him?
Well, that's what I was just going to say is the Columbus Blue Jackets are looking for a player of a similar situation, meaning high-end draft pick or someone with tons of promise. If you're the Pittsburgh Penguins, what do you have to offer? How could you even be in the mix?
I don't know. I guess you give up this year's first.
To what?
And something else, but you're right. They don't have a lot else, right? Like, I guess they got Yager.
No, they traded Yager for.
Oh, they traded him. That's right. They don't even have him. So, because their only other first round pick then that's young is Pickering, correct?
Yeah, but he's in the lineup already, and he's viewed as a B prospect.
Yeah, but that's my point. Like, they don't. You can monitor a situation, but if you don't have the pieces to get into the conversation, like somebody's going to be able to offer you more than this year's first, is what I'm saying.
100%.
Yeah.
So are they even actually a player?
Yeah. And what do you like? Why can't Jiricek play in Columbus? I don't get it.
I don't know. Did you see him score the overtime winner? That's what I'd be asking. He scored the overtime winner on Sunday in the AHL.
So just keep him.
I think that ship has sailed. I just don't know how they get it back on the rails, to be honest. I think it's so far devolved over multiple regimes now that I don't know if it's fixable. I really don't.
Yeah, I don't know. I would sit down and have a very open conversation and say, okay, the past is the past. What do you want moving forward? What do we want moving forward? How can we make it work? Because we think we can be a big part of the team. Now, maybe they can, Frank, maybe the player, but at some point the player, like, I don't know, I find some, you know what, geez, everybody wants to be rushed to the NHL right away. And I understand it, but some guys aren't ready. I'm not saying
he has nothing left to prove in the AHL, like literally nothing.
I don't know. Maybe you're right. It's not like he's played a lot this year, though, either, right? He's only played a total of what, 8 games?
Two seasons ago, 38 points in 55 games. Last season, 19 points in 29. This year so far, this weekend, 2-2, including the OT winner. He's played, I don't know, 90 AHL games. Not to say like you need to play forever, but when you're clearly better than the rest of your peers, and yet you're not getting NHL time. Like, again, it's more so like the decisions that they're making to play over him in Columbus right now.
Well, that's one where I just Frank, and Jiricek turns 21 later this week. He's a 21-year-old player who's played like 86 AHL games. He's been, 2 seasons pro hockey in North America, really, and this is his 3rd. And you're going to trade him. And we've seen defense, and I don't know why this is much more of a pattern in the NHL. You can go back to Chris Pronger, traded out of Hartford. Like, look at young defensemen who get traded before they've fully matured. It's a harder position, especially for bigger D men. You're not elite right away, and that's fine. And then you look at these guys, and for the next decade or so, you're like, can't believe they traded him. And this one,
I agree. I think it's a mistake.
Screams.
But then it was on you to fix it, because the second when you come in as the next GM with a new coaching staff, or relatively, you change out your head coach, why isn't that guy playing 18, 20 minutes a night? And when he's not sitting as a healthy scratch, he's playing 12. Like, that just doesn't work. That's not an organization that's thinking 3 steps down the line, particularly on a team that's not very good. Like, what are you gaining by playing vets or players that aren't part of the long-term solution?
Yeah, like they claim Dante Fabro on waivers. Couldn't you have just played Jiricek?
What that isn't that the point?
Yeah, like that to me
They're
is
in 21st
that's
place.
the
Where are they
great
going?
example.
Where are they going?
Yeah. Hey, hey, I get that. Like Jake Christensen's played and he's around 15, but to me, when they got Fabro, and essentially they're both right shot D-men, they chose Fabro over Jiricek at this point, and that to me is stunning.
So didn't you just answer your own question though? Because you said, "Hey, wouldn't we sit down and figure this all out?" Like,
yeah,
they're the ones doing this. Am I wrong?
No, that's fair. Yeah. Well,
maybe they just think he's not very good. Is that what they're broadcasting?
Yeah, I guess. No, it's true. But just like in life, Frank, we've all seen someone. You've seen men and women will have dumped someone and then later years really regret it. Happens all the time. So. NHL,
why, you
probably
from
no
experience?
No, not really. No. I thankfully have no regrets on anybody I broke up with. So.
Oh, I was thinking the other way around. Are you telling us that someone should regret dumping you?
No, not maybe. I've only ever actually been broken up with once, and I loved it. It was great. It's kind of like Seinfeld. You know what? Because when you have to be the breaker upper, sometimes it's brutal, right? Like you don't necessarily want. People always say they want to hear the truth. They don't want to hear the complete truth when you're breaking up with someone. Try to give them the Costanza, it's not you, it's me line. I tried once to be very honest about a girl because she had kids and I just wasn't really into dating someone with kids. And I tried it. Everybody's like, you got to try it. So I was like, okay. And I'm like, I can't do it. And so I was just like, you know what? I don't think I'm ready to be someone who can date someone with kids. And 3 weeks later, when I saw that person in public, she threw a drink in my face.
Yikes.
So yeah, good times. I don't think there's she might be regretting it. I sure wasn't. Let's
that, please. Thank you.
Let's one other one quickly. How concerned do you think they are in Carolina now? Freddie Anderson's 8 weeks. We haven't got the timeline yet on Kochetkov, but they obviously recalled a goaltender here, and like they're playing unreal. But now that's both their goalies, and Spencer Martin, step on up, big man. Here's your opportunity.
That's why they got the big Spence. I mean, that's what he's there for. They think one of the best third goalies in the league, if not the best. But nonetheless, did you see the video of the Kochetkov injury from behind the net?
Yes.
Oh, awful.
Yeah. No.
Yeah.
It didn't look short term there, did it?
From a concussion standpoint, no, it didn't. I mean, he was down and out. So hope for the best for him. And yeah, but this is also a tale as old as time. Freddie Anderson and an injury. Like, if you think you're going to make it through with just 2 goalies in Carolina in 1 year where Freddie Anderson's one of your goalies, like they should have been well prepared for this. Yeah.
Wow. They got to hope the Kochetkov is only, if it's a month, I think the Hurricanes are fine. Obviously I think their points percentage will drop a little bit in that time. You just look at early on. Now, maybe Martin will play better the more he plays, but he's got an 870 and a 321 goals against in his 3 starts. Whereas Anderson, who's only started 4 games, has 941, 148. Kochetkov has a 904, 242. So, it's almost a full goal more when Martin's in. Now I'd have to look at who he played. Did he just get unlucky and have to play really good teams? I'm looking. He started against New Jersey, Ottawa, and Colorado. So 2 pretty good teams, but we'll see what happens here. But it is a concern. It's because that concussion, not every concussion's equal, Frank. And that play, you're right. If people haven't seen it, you can just tell like now, I don't know. Maybe you could look really bad in the moment and then you recover. That's the thing about concussions. You can recover so much quicker, different than other people. Like Frank, you'll get bonked in the head. I'll get bonked in the head, and both of us will have a different recovery time.
Totally. It all depends. So I'd never put a timeline on it, but I think at the minimum, you're probably talking 10 to 14 days. So it's kind of generally where we're at now.
Yeah. Let's bring in Tyler Yaremchuk to the pod. Ty, how you doing?
You're muted.
You're muted.
Ready to rock with another edition of Buy or Sell, brought to you by our friends over at Bet365. That promo code, once again, is NATION. Whatever the moment, it's never ordinary at Bet365. I love asking this one. It's an easy one. 2.5 more coaching changes is where I'm going to set the line. You buying or selling, going over or under, Frank?
Oh, we got to name the victims, I think.
It's only fair.
I'll take the over. I'll buy. I'll say Greg Cronin in Anaheim. I'll say eventually Mike Sullivan in Pittsburgh. I just think it's a matter of time. And based on body language, frustration, all those things. And I don't want anyone to confuse that for a second, by the way, that he just woke up and was a bad coach. Like, this is purely on their roster. And 3, look, Detroit is 26th in the league. Like, I don't know how they continue on. It has to be at some point a coaching change. And not saying that's also going to fix their issue. Just what are the Red Wings doing?
Yeah, I would agree there on Detroit. Anaheim, is it gonna happen during the season? Are you talking before the regular season ends, Ty, or before the technical season ends?
Do before the regular season ends.
Okay, regular season ends. I will go under. I think Detroit and Pittsburgh.
All right. Next up for you guys,
and he's not buying on how bad the situation is with Greg Cronin and the players.
No, I think it probably is, but I wonder if they just ride it out, Frank, to give themselves a higher pick.
Fair. All right, looking at
and what? Hold on a second. And what? Make everyone on your team absolutely hate your organization?
Yeah, it's fair point.
That sounds like a good plan. Let's do that.
Yeah. Well, I just didn't want to be the exact same. That'd have been boring.
Let's torch the entire organization on the way down to get a better draft pick.
Okay, how about this? Since we both agreed, and is there any other team that you think could be in the market?
Yeah, you know what? I think you have to raise the eyebrow at the Philadelphia Flyers and John Tortorella. I really do. We talked about it. Was the last pod or the one before? At some point when all these guys, Frost, Brink, Farabee, Forrester, go through the list, when they're all struggling and all miserable, again, at some point it's not on everyone else and it's partially tied to one guy. So I think the longer that goes on, they have to evaluate. And before anyone confuses that with me somehow shitting on John Tortorella, that's not the case. I've been super consistent since we've talked about his hire, which is great coach, wrong fit, wrong team. Look what they're on track to finish with again. They're on track to finish with 80 points and probably, I don't know, they're probably in the end going to finish 8-10 points out of the playoffs. Okay. Why? Absolute no man's land. It should be nightmare fuel. Last year alone was it. They had a really, really good coaching job that fell apart in the final 3 weeks of the season that then compounded all, and not to take anything away from Jet Luchenko, the pick that they made in the first round, but instead of picking in the teens, they need to be picking in the top 5, in the top 3. That's what they need. So this whole idea of like, let's sit back and just, let's float through another season where A, our players that are here aren't getting any better, and B, we are bleeping ourselves into oblivion with yet another mid first round pick. Someone make it stop. Someone, let's have an honest intellectual conversation.
That's fair.
Too far.
The other team I would throw in, I don't think you can count out the Boston Bruins either removing the interim tag or getting someone else. The way they've gone through coaches, man, I wouldn't be surprised if Joe Sacco gets a month and they're like, man, he's not our answer, and we're going to go to someone else.
So let's just play that game out a little bit. Let's say the Pittsburgh Penguins do decide to make a coaching change with Mike Sullivan. Does he just automatically land in Boston?
I think there's a very good chance.
That'd be something.
And would that be interesting? Has someone ever coached their son-in-law before? I guess that's happened probably. Mike Sullivan's daughter is married to Charlie McAvoy.
Yeah.
I didn't even know that.
Has that ever happened?
I don't.
It's going to happen at Four Nations Faceoff, I guess, anyway. So
yeah. We'll see. We've
Not
had
that
coaches
matters,
coach
I
their
just
son as
wanted to-
assistant coaches,
yeah, just wanted to throw that out there.
Yeah.
right? Like Dave Lowry was an assistant coach for his son in Winnipeg.
He was then the interim head coach for his son.
Yeah.
All right. Next one I got for you guys. If you had to buy on one of the Blues or Bruins being a playoff team this year, which one do you think has the best shot of getting back or of getting into the playoffs after their coaching change? Is it obviously Boston? Is it like not even close, Frank?
Oh,
It's not even close for me.
Yeah.
No.
I had it written
Nothing
down.
to add, honestly. I think Boston's way closer.
What do you think? Then I'll do this, and I'm looking at the odds right now, so I'll be able to give you Bet365's answer too. But Greg's, what would you say is the percent chance that the Bruins get in?
Well, they're in tough. They still can't score. I think that's going to be their concern, right? Like they won 2 games and they're with their new coach, but it's because they won defensively and their goalies made some saves, and which is kind of eerily how they got in the playoffs last year. So I think Buffalo is really their big contender. Toronto's playing well. Buffalo, although we've seen this before, you win 3 or 4 in a row, and then what happens? But I would give Boston probably still like a, I don't know, 55, 60% chance. Is that where it's at?
Frank?
Well, it's way lower than that, but I would agree that I think their actual chances are way higher than the models would suggest, because the models are also based off of a lot of what we've seen to this point. And I'm sorry, I refuse to believe that Jeremy Swayman is going to continue to play the rest of this season at an 887 pace. I don't believe it.
Bet365 has them at -140, which is implied odds of about 58%. So you pretty much nailed it, Greg's. The last one I got for you, I got 2 teams that Bet365 has like almost dead tied to make the playoffs. One's in the East, one's in the West. The Sabres are +170 to make the playoffs. The Flames are +150 to make the playoffs in the West. Greg's, if you had to buy on one of the Flames or Sabres, whose playoff shots are you buying on?
Oh, I'm probably still buying on the Sabres. The Calgary Flames, what is it? 18 games where they haven't scored 3 goals in regulation.
They win.
I just don't think that's a recipe long term. Edmonton's obviously going to find their way. I still think Vancouver, when they get Demko back, that'll make, and then when they get JT Miller back, I think they're a better team. I think LA is a better team, and obviously Vegas is a better team. So I don't see the 5th place team in the Pacific being better than the 4th place team in the Central. So I would go with Buffalo.
I'm here to tell you, I think the Calgary Flames are making the playoffs.
Whew.
And I want you to write it down the week of Thanksgiving. And I know, Jason, you just look like you sobered up after a long weekend when I said that. But there's something about this Flames team. Great goaltending, and they're scrappy. Look at the teams that they've beat recently. Not cupcakes at all. Minnesota Wild have been on a heater. Beat the Wild. Rangers come into town. Beat the Rangers. Shut out the Preds. Beat the Kings. I mean, I don't know. I'm not like, I think there is a real power this season in the Calgary Flames and their belief. Take that for what you will. But if you're asking me Flames or Sabres, which team has more belief? I don't even think it's close. Even if you just pulled their own team. Just saying.
Well, they're, like I said, basically dead tied over on the odds boards at Bet365. There you go, guys. That is a wrap on this week's edition of Buy or Sell.
Never underestimate a team that has an us against the world mentality. Last year, it was not fun to be a Calgary Flame. It was not fun the year before. This year, it has been. And their goaltending has been really good. I would argue, instead of the fact that they can't score not being a recipe for success, I would argue that that's just an incredibly unlucky run, that they haven't had any game in their last, how many did you say? 17?
Yeah.
That they haven't scored more than 3 in regulation. That seems quite odd.
Now let's get to the second half of the pod, brought to you by Fountain Tire. They specialize in tire and auto service, and they'll treat your vehicle like it's their vehicle. If you need new tires, maybe your engine's got a little rattle, they can fit both. Stop into Fountain Tire right now. You can save up to $225 on the select 4 set of tires, including Goodyear, but only until December 14th. Stop at Fountain Tire or go online and book your appointment today, fountaintire.com. A big event happened, Frank, over the weekend. That was the Jumbo Joe Thornton jersey retirement in San Jose. And Joe is one of the biggest personalities for people who've never met him. He is one of the most revered teammates. Guys loved him. And the thing that, like, Joe Thornton, even when he was, an older guy, and I'm putting it in quotations because 38 isn't old in life, but in hockey, it's old, later in his years in San Jose, he has a really good relationship and friendship with young guys on the team, making them feel comfortable, inviting them over for dinner all the time. And that story from Doug Murray that got both Doug and Joe choked up about, how Joe and his wife, one time he asked Doug, anybody who missed it, Doug Murray's a rookie guy, well, 3rd year in the league, but a young guy. And one day gets a call from Joe, hey, we need you to come help move a family. Oh, okay. Thought it was like a new teammate or something. Well, it turns out it was a single mom who had been homeless with her 2 kids. And Joe and his wife just found him a place to live and put him up and said, hey, don't tell anyone. This is just our thing. And now many years later, Doug shared that story. And there's just so many
years, by the way.
Yeah. Yeah. There were so many kind of unique stories about Joe Thornton there. And the thing was, like, Joe himself, I loved how much fun he was having. Like, he's a big personality, and he's just like, hey, you know what, made the joke about if I score 4 goals, what I would do. It's still a funny story. And that's all I'm going to say about that. A classic Forrest Gump line. So I thought it was a fantastic ceremony for the Sharks.
I typically have a tough time watching jersey retirement nights. That one was so enjoyable for a million different reasons. Yes. 1, because of the personality, but 2, look, and the raw emotion of it is amazing, right? Like, of any of these, like, whether it's a Hall of Fame acceptance speech or whether it's a jersey retirement, the ultimate sort of pinnacle crowning achievement of your career. Super impressive. This one was different because it was fun. Like, there was an energy to it where it was like, hey, we're not going to be crying our way through this. We're going to enjoy this, and it's, it's going to be fun. We're going to laugh. And like, that is Jumbo. So like that makes sense. And I also thought, in that same vein, the Sharks did such an amazing job with the actual presentation itself, from like the idea of like smashing that button with your family that sends your jersey up. Which I don't know if you saw that or not, but just like the different looks and graphics that they had, the videos, everything that they did, the sheer number of teammates seated on the ice. I'd say that was one of the most well done jersey retirement or Hall of Fame presentations that you'll ever see.
Well, you could tell how beloved he was by his teammates. And really, it started, I don't know if you saw the YouTube hour special with Thornton and Jason Demers.
Yes.
I don't know. Oh my God. Like
but
Joe's
that's Jumbo though. Put like, how many times have you interviewed Jumbo with him like uncomfortably unclothed?
Oh yeah. He loves buddy. He has tarps off all the time. Like,
but like, it doesn't matter where, like, he would be walking in the hallway like that.
Yep.
Not just like, hey, this guy's off to the changing room. Like, that was it. And sometimes, sans towel.
Well, walking down the street. Remember, he's walking. I didn't know what the city was, and they're talking about their teammates, and it's him and Brent Burns, and they got their big beards, and they got no shirts on. And it's like, hey, what's happening? That that's Joe. He has a lot of fun in life. He's a hell of a player, no question about it. But I think there's just certain guys who have a way of making their teammates feel important, and that's what he did. I've talked to so many players that played with Joe Thornton, and they could, like, their face lights up when you ask them about Joe Thornton, and that isn't the case with everybody.
How different would things have been for the Bruins had they kept Joe Thornton?
Dude, I was just, well, you know what? You don't know, whether it would have worked the same or not. San Jose had really good players too. Like Joe was great, but they had a good team, man. That's probably the best team
that never won. Yeah, I would totally agree.
Yeah.
I think that the success that they had regular season year in and year out to not win it's bonkers.
Yeah. Like they were good too. Like they had the most wins in the regular season under Doug Wilson for like a 15-year period. Like it wasn't like they had one or two kicks of the cat. They were in conference finals numerous times and just unable to get it done. And what's unique, and that's what I've always argued. I don't hear many people, wow, Joe Thornton didn't win a cup. Like he's a first ballot Hall of Famer. He's 1,500 point player. Like he's an elite player. And when your career's over, when you're in it, people talk so much about the need for a cup. When it's over, I don't hear a lot of chatter about, well, he didn't win a cup, because it shouldn't matter.
Still, it's so amazing to go back and look at the Sharks and their history and all that time with Jumbo. And like you said, the fact that they didn't get it done. But then after all of that, to get to the final in 2016 was definitely the most unexpected run of all of them. And they still didn't get it done. Lost to Sid and the Pens.
Yeah. I'm sure, like, if you talk to those guys, like there's, to say it doesn't matter. Obviously it matters to them for sure. But I meant more on the legacy factor, how it doesn't. We're coming up, Frank, on Thanksgiving in the United States, the end of the month, and lots of people look at the standings. And so if we look today, and I know we still have 4 days to see, who's going to essentially be in or not. And there'll be some teams, I think, by Thursday who technically won't be in a playoff spot at that point. Edmonton might not be, they would be one. There's a chance Tampa Bay might not be, or they're technically not in now. Are there teams
that's not ever what the stat was. The stat was, are you within 4 points of the playoffs?
Yeah. Well, that's going to be almost everybody. I shouldn't say that. Montreal, really. Ottawa. What about Ottawa? Quickly, we haven't touched on them. They lost 4 in a row. Their goaltending isn't where they want it to be. Their scoring isn't where they want it to be all of a sudden. What do you make of the Sens? Like, they were supposed to take a step this year, and they started out well, but kind of come crashing down to earth.
Yeah, I think the really tough part to kind of process with all of that has been, how come their goaltending is back in the same spot that it has been? Like Linus Ullmark brought in, supposed to be the guy, the Vezina Trophy winner, signs a big extension before the season starts, 881 save percentage. So Linus Ullmark, prior to that, I mean, is this not the best example that we've ever seen in terms of team dependent or goaltending results dependent on team structure in front of you? I mean, like, think about Linus Ullmark's career. Prior to this year, 247 games played at a 917 save percentage. About as good as you can do. And this year, 13 games, 881.
What if I told you, Frank, that Ottawa, 6th fewest shots against, 4th best expected goals against, but their goaltender's not making saves? I don't think it's team defense, really.
I think my head would explode.
Well, those are the numbers.
So what would you do?
Well, I think you're Steve Staios, and I had Steve on my show last week, and he talked about how they're still early in it, and it's hard, and as much as you want to rush things, that you have to kind of stay on page. And he talked about the human element when it came specifically to Ullmark, and he says, you know what, I played with a lot of guys. He goes, it's hard to explain, but some guys just take a little bit longer to get comfortable in a new situation. And so where he says, we're really going to work with Linus to just try to get him comfortable, that maybe it's not just technical stuff, that you got to get more comfortable in a new situation. So, like, they just signed him to a new deal. He's not going anywhere. I think they've got their top 4 defense in a situation where they want. They'd still like Thomas.
And by the way,
Chabot
Jensen has been really good. I know we crushed that trade. Jensen has been awesome.
Well, you crushed it, really.
I
You
crushed
hated
that
him.
trade. Yeah.
And Chabot at times still can give up, but most offensive D-men are like that. I think overall their top 4 defense is fine, and their team defense under Travis Green, all the underlying numbers suggest it's been better. That Ullmark to date hasn't really carried his part of the bargain. And I think if you're Ottawa, you're probably confident that he can, get back to it. Because the funny thing was, Frank, Kevin Woodley outlined it last year in Boston. It wasn't a great team environment. Swayman and Ullmark were unreal, better than the actual shots against and high danger chances and such, that they outperformed him. Their saves above expected was quite high. And this year it's just not. So I think they got to hope that Ullmark will just get back to it. I still wonder sometimes, though, they've had that same core group of guys, especially up front. And sometimes I wonder if you just need to, there needs to be a change there. And will Steve Staios, make a deal? He did say, Frank, I found quite interesting, that he said at the trade deadline last year, he was looking to make a bigger splash, but it didn't come to fruition, which makes me believe he's still looking to do that.
Yeah. So actually, while we're talking about it, the Sens just announced that Artem Zub has a fracture in his foot and will be out for a while.
Oh,
and in that same related vein, I was told over the weekend that the Sens have been in conversation about making a major shakeup involving Josh Norris. So I think that's
Josh
the one.
Norris.
Yeah, I think that's the one forward that if they're shaking things up and moving things around, Josh Norris apparently has come up in conversation. I don't know how likely that is, meaning if you look at his injury and if you look at the 5 years remaining after this one, I'd have a tough time signing up for the risk profile, but an obviously talented player.
Man, their center depth, their top 3 centers are really good. Like I like Shane Pinto a lot with Norris, and then Stützle's obviously very skilled. Terrible in the faceoffs, but unfortunately he's really skilled. So yeah, that would be interesting to see what they do. But sometimes maybe you need a shakeup where losing becomes the norm, and sometimes you can't shake out of that. You need to, comfort level needs to get jarred a bit.
They need a shot across the bow. I think at this point, it's mostly been the same core of players going back a pretty long time now.
Yes, I would agree. Quickly on that note, we talked lots about St. Louis today. 2 other teams. What do you make of Seattle and Utah?
In what way?
Well, Utah everybody's excited, but now they're 8-10-3, right? Like not great. Jordan Eberle's out.
For the Utahns, I think this season is kind of a write-off.
It's just like we're just happy to be here.
No, it's not that. It's how Sean Dursey and John Marino are out pretty much until February. How many teams can lose 2 of their top 4 defensemen and then be like, oh yeah, everything's fine, we're good? You can't really trade your way out of it because it's a temporary solution. Because then those guys are going to be back, and then what?
Yeah, fair.
I don't know what, and by the way, their goaltending has been fascinating. It certainly seems like Vejmelka, who was seemingly on his way out this year, has taken the reins right out from under Connor Ingram, who was one of the best stories in the league last year. 926 versus 871. I mean, it ain't close.
No.
So I don't know where, and then so let's have the larger, more holistic conversation. Let's put all that aside and say Bill Armstrong and his staff and Chris Armstrong have decided that they're going to make a significant trade to improve this team in the short term. Who are they knocking out of the playoff picture?
Yeah, no, it's true. It's that's why I said I think they're a team that maybe has to cool their jets. They have enough picks. I'm not sure they want more. But Seattle's the other one now. Seattle can't score, and they just lost Eberle for a few months. I wonder if a change is coming there, if they're looking to maybe move some guys out this year. They got to be.
They had 2 guys on my trade board Yanni Gord and Brandon Tanev, but they've got, I think, a larger, more philosophical question to ask, and that is, do they have the right person at the top of the organization
as their manager?
Yes.
Yeah, historically very slow to move in decision making.
Which is, there's nothing wrong with being methodical. It's just that this team now is essentially the same milquetoast team that existed in Carolina under Ron Francis. And that's, I'm sure that sounds really harsh, but I think that's, if we're having an honest conversation about what they look like and where they're heading, they have a collection of good players that are steady, and they have other good players on the way. They do. Jagger Firkus, Berkeley Catton, Oscar Fisker Molgard. Go through their list. I know they really like Ryan Winterton as well. Where's the star? Who's the star player in that group?
No, they
Who's
don't have
the
one.
star player on their roster right now?
They don't have one. That's the problem.
Again, really good players, but no truly elite superstars. And as much as hockey is not based on that, like the NBA is, which is a star-driven league, you need to have at least something that sets you apart. And I just don't know what that factor is for the Kraken. I don't know that they're built to even find one, given where, like, think about the conversation we just had about the Flyers. If Seattle is drafting in the same relative range, anywhere from like 8 to 16 or 20, where are they going to find it? Where are they going to get it?
Oh, that's why I said, I think Seattle, as hard as it is, I know I heard ticket prices and everything, fans were upset. I think Seattle has to recognize that they're not really close to being a competitive team, and they're good, and they'd be better off being a worse team. I'm just not sure if that's the appetite of the organization.
I would agree that it's probably not, because they just went out and made these signings. Stevenson, Montour, they know the NBA is coming. They're in a fight for dollars. It's happening. It's just a matter of when. The NBA is coming back to Seattle. Just like stamp it, rubber stamp it. It's happening.
Okay, but is that team going to be? So I think the most important thing is to get competitive first, because that expansion team in the NBA isn't going to be very good right away.
But that's my point. It's going to be first one to build a winner. First one to build a team that wins. You've got a 4-year head start, 5-year, maybe more. But if you languish between now and then, and interest in your market wanes and people yawn, good luck, because even if the other team's not winning, they're going to latch to the new shiny toy.
Potentially.
I just think at some point, and it was one of my bold predictions to start the year, that Ron Francis will get moved to president and Jason Botterill will take over as GM. It's bold for a lot of reasons, but I think it's, I think you need to have the conversation.
I totally agree. The more I watch Seattle play, I'm just like, I'm not sure what they are and where they're going. And that's a concern. They got to figure it out. And it's not easy. We started the pod talking about a tough decision, and Doug Armstrong, you don't care if you think it's the right decision, you don't worry about what other people, how it's going to look, if it's going to hurt anyone's feelings. You make the decision because you think it's better for the long-term health of your organization. I think Seattle has to do something similar.
Is milquetoast too harsh?
Well, no, but I honestly, I don't even know what, like, I know what the reference is, but I've never tried it. So I always laugh at that term, milquetoast. But no, it's not. It's I think it's.
I just think of bland.
Yes, look at what happened post in Carolina since Francis left.
Yeah.
Right. They were competitive before, but not in the same vein. And I look at them now, and I look at some of the moves they made, and there's a little bit more assertiveness at times in the GM position.
Totally.
Frankie,
fair.
good pod, man. Enjoy Thanksgiving. We're off on Thursday, so we will chat next Monday. On behalf of Frank, I'm Gregor. That's a rundown. Brought to you by Fountain Tire and Bet365. Have a great week.
What's up, hockey fans? If you enjoyed that video, then you need to be hitting the subscribe button right here at Daily Faceoff. Exclusive interviews and analysis from our hockey insider Frank Saravalli, fantasy updates from Brock Sagan, and a daily live show at noon Eastern Monday through Friday. You don't want to miss any of the fantastic content, so hit that subscribe button.